Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing another one of my I Read 3 little series where I pick a genre and I read 3 books in it. In the past I have done things like I read 3 historical romance, I read 3 thrillers, I read 3 horror books, etc. And this time what I want to tackle is fantasy but for YA novels. So in the category of young adult, I'd like to read 3 books that are contemporary fantasy. And I'm specifying contemporary fantasy because fantasy is a very big genre and I could pick completely different books that would fit into this category, this genre, which is not really the goal of this series. So I want to specify contemporary fantasy because contemporary fantasy is fantasy that has linked to our current day and world. So it's not a completely off-world thing where you have a lot of world building and lore that needs to often result in a lot of info dumping at the beginning of the book, but that kind of needs a lot of building and a much bigger book. I much prefer books that are set up in a world, but there are elements of fantasy. Think of things like paranormal, for instance, that involves things like vampires and ghosts and witches, etc. Is actually a subgenre of this, and it's very similar to contemporary fantasy because the idea is when you're reading contemporary, you're reading books that are set in our day and time and in our world, in a world that exists. I hope I'm explaining this okay and that it doesn't confuse you more than anything, but basically that is the genre that I want to read this time. And the reason why I picked this genre is because I actually already know that I like this type of stories. I don't want to say just books because I love TV shows and movies and all that have to do with that genre. Let's go through the books that I have picked for this. So the first one is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I was so excited when this came out, notably for the beautiful cover. It is a gorgeous book. It is a thick boy. It's 498 pages, so just short of 500. But it is YA, so I'm not expecting that to be too heavy to read. And this, from what I understand, tells the story of this girl who, I think her mother dies and she has to move cities or something, and she moves into this new school, and where she gets there, it seems like people have a secret society going on that has something to do with powers and Arthurian legend. That's all I know, and I'm so excited to plunge into this. The second book that I've picked for this is The Night Itself. This is not very well known, and therefore I hope that this is still interesting to you guys, but I've had this on my shelves for so long. This actually came out, when did it come out? This came out in 2013, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've had it since then. Probably that I bought it later than that, but still, it's an old book, and it basically tells the story of this girl who one time picks up her grandfather's katana, and when she does, she kind of realizes that it means a lot more than just a costume piece. It says here, her actions unleash an ancient evil onto the streets of modern-day London. And I guess she kind of realizes that the katana has legendary powers as well, and that she needs to be able to control them, otherwise she's gonna die. So it sounded super exciting. And I guess I just wanted to pick up something that sounded different at the time, but still had elements of fantasy in it. And I don't know, it just sounded like a lot of fun. So this is the second book that I'm gonna be reading for this. And then finally, I decided to pick up Cemetery Boys, which I think is actually a bit more paranormal than fantasy, you know, contemporary fantasy, but I'm still gonna put it in there because this came out quite recently. I really wanted to read it at the time, and the cover is really cool as well. Yes, I'm a sucker for beautiful covers, and under the jacket, it's got this beautiful gold rose. So yeah, I was influenced by this. The reason why I think this one is more paranormal is because it's about witches and ghosts. Basically, this guy, I can't remember his name, the main character, Yadriel, there we go, is part of a family of witches, and he accidentally summons a ghost that refuses to leave. And I think it's a romance between the two. I'm not sure because I haven't read it, but I think it is. And I don't know why, it's giving me very supernatural vibes from the synopsis. So I have high hopes for this as well, and I hope that I'm really gonna enjoy it. If you have any comments or questions while I'm vlogging, please do leave a comment below because I always try to respond to them. So I guess I'll see you guys when I start reading. go again. I have now read quite a big chunk of Legendborn. So I've now reached this much of this book. So I've read 148 pages of this book out of 500 pages, which is quite long, which is why I read this much. Because normally what I do is I stop for a little bit after 100 pages to tell you my thoughts and see how it's going. But most books that I read are like 300 pages, not 500. So I felt like the need to read a little bit more. So far, really enjoying it. First of all, I didn't even notice this was on the cover underneath the dust jacket, but it's beautiful. So really enjoying this book. It reads so fast and I don't really notice the break in chapters. I kind of continue reading as if it was just one continuous big chapter and that's it, which I think is actually good. That means that I'm not noticing, okay, I can stop here and I can just pick it back up later. In my mind, I'm like, oh, I can just go on and go on and go on, which is really good. So the main character that we're following, her name is Bree, short for Brianna, and so as I thought from having read the synopsis, she just lost her mom 3 months earlier, and her mom died in a car accident from what I remember, and basically she's left alone with her dad, but her and her best friend Alice had always wanted to go to this early college thing where it's basically the last 2 years of high school from what I understand, but you get specific classes that kind of prep you for what college is going to be like, and you live in dorms and all that, almost like you're in college already. I frankly don't really understand the principle, because to me the idea of leaving home at 18 is already, wow, that is so early to become an adult or act like one. And to do so even earlier, like at 16, just sounds crazy to me, but okay, she's badass just for doing that. So basically when she joins, they go to this party thing. Her and Alice kind of get dragged by this other girl, and they go to this outside of campus party type of thing where like all the new students kind of try and go to, it's almost like a baptism of you've just arrived here and it's a rite of passage type of thing, right? So they go to this, and unfortunately something weird happens and Brianna sees it, and she realizes that there's like some sort of a monster in the woods, and everyone else is running away because they're worried the cops are coming, but Brianna stays behind, and she then receives some sort of order, like some sort of command by a boy there and a girl who kind of tell her like, you have to leave, forget what you've seen. And the boy in question, his name is Selwyn, shortened by Sel, and the girl is Victoria, shortened by Tor. So Sel kind of almost uses a sort of spell to make Bree forget and everyone else forget and run away from the fight where there's like a strange monster thing that's just appeared. But Bree manages to fight through it, and she remembers what she was doing, and she goes back and goes to have a look at what's going on and realizes that both Sel and Tor have some sort of powered up spell-like weapons that they're using to defeat this thing. And she realizes that magic is real and there's some weird shit going on. This is all happening pretty early on. But then what happens next is that both Bree and Alice are taken back to their dorm by the cops that have actually arrived at the scene. And then Bree realizes that the cop is actually obeying Sel's orders as well, and that there's something bigger in terms of secret society going on. So she goes back to the dorms. They don't get kicked out, but they could almost have gotten expelled, and Alice gets really mad at her. And Bree finds herself feeling more and more lonely because obviously her best friend who she came here with just doesn't want to talk to her anymore because she almost got her expelled. And Bree herself she's talking about it as if there's an before Bree and an after Bree, talking about her mother's death, and she's built walls since her mother's death and just kind of, I guess, hides behind them and uses them as protection for more hurt and for whatever people's reactions are going to be about her. But even though they didn't get expelled, the dean kind of tells them they're both going to get a sort of babysitter, so someone who's from an older year in the school who's going to come and help them, make sure that they're okay, lead them on the right path, I guess, but also kind of just, help them with the life at the school. So kind of tell them like, oh, you can join this group of students there, or make sure that their homework is all done, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, a sort of babysitter, I guess. And when Bree meets her babysitter, his name is Nick, she's obviously on the fence and doesn't really want one, but then you can see that there's almost immediately a sort of connection between the two, and he's very hot, very nice, and just super sweet, and I feel like immediately there's a little connection there. But then she realizes as they encounter yet another monster that he's also part of it, and that he knows everything about it as well, and that he's part of the secret order thing that uses magic and everything. And then she's obviously plunging into this world slowly and gets to know more about what's going on. She realizes that she has some sort of repressed memory that she manages to get back in her head, and she realizes that someone else had already erased her memory before. Not just that guy's cell in the woods when she didn't want to run away from that monster and he forced her to, but before that in the past, when she met the police officer who came to tell her and her dad that her mom was dead, he actually performed some sort of spell as well and erased her memory, and so she realizes that he was part of this whole thing. She wants to know why and whether her mom was a casualty in this strange thing that's going on with magic and all that, so she decides that she wants to investigate and become a part of it. And that's kind of where we're starting from, really, because although this book is quite long, I'd say the first 100 pages are kind of setting it up, and afterwards we really plunge into it and get to know more about this secret order society thing that has to do with Arthurian legend. And yeah, so far really enjoying it. I'm loving all the connections with Arthurian legend. I really find that super interesting and fascinating, and I love that type of books. I also really like the main character. She is so feisty and badass and just doesn't cower from the hard stuff, but also feels real and vulnerable at the right moments. And when you would have a reaction that you're like, I would totally react by, I don't know, like cowering away or doing this or doing that, she also reacts that way in a way that feels human and normal. She's not just some sort of, wow, she's just badass at all times. She's not a Mary Sue. She doesn't feel like unrealistically so. I don't know whether this book is gonna set up anything between her and Cell, and I really hope not, because I hate the guy and he is such a dickhead every single time that we've met him, and I worry that it's a setup to become like enemies to lovers type of thing, and I hope not. I really hope that if there's gonna be a romantic interest, and that is gonna be a heterosexual one, because I'm not sure either, I hope that it's gonna be with Nick, because Nick is so much nicer, and also the way he's described, I was like, he sounds hot. He just sounds hotter to me. I don't know. I don't find that the whole I'm an asshole vibe and everyone finds me super handsome thing is a thing that I find attractive, so Cell is not it for me, and I hope that he's not gonna be it for Bree either. Hello again. I'm not finished yet, but I only have about 100 pages left. So yeah, so far still loving it, really loving the main character, Bree. She is so cool and just so badass, and I love everything about her. I have a much better idea about who the other characters are now, so I feel like it's just a slow start, not in the sense that nothing happens, because lots of stuff happens in the beginning, but you kind of feel like things are going to evolve into more of a found family type of trope, and it kind of does, but it takes its time, and it takes its time for you to also get to know all the other characters and like them equally, even the ones that you hate them at the beginning. So yeah, I hope that I'm gonna enjoy the ending just as much, but I've been told recently that the ending will leave me destroyed, and I don't like that. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm really worried, because I don't like sad endings and bad endings, but if it's a question of like, oh, it's just a huge cliffhanger for the next book, because I think this is actually a duology, let me check. Okay, yes, I can confirm there is another book coming after this. I don't know whether it's a duology or trilogy or whatever, but I just saw it on Goodreads. The actual book has been announced for 2021 at some point, but because this book came out last year, end of the year, it's probably gonna come out end of the year, this year. I'm not too worried, because I feel like even if it destroys me, even if I'm like, oh my god, what the hell, I will still know there's another book coming afterwards, so we're good, we're good. Then we have the character of Cell, and I can tell you that for him, I'm just doing a roller coaster. Like, I'm going, I really hate this guy. Oh, he's not so bad, I kind of like him. No, I really hate this guy. Oh, he's not so bad, I kind of like him. No, I really... So, I don't know yet. I have a feeling he's going to be the character that everyone fucking loves. But for me, it's more of a, can we not with the toxic masculinity, please, because it's kind of pissing me off when it's in YA novels. It pisses me off in adult novels as well, but I almost feel like it's more expected. But in YA novels, it's like, don't teach us to love this character that is acting like a dick all of the time, please, because that's not a good idea. But when it's in YA novels, I just hate the fact that it's pretty much saying it's okay to stan a character that is basically super toxic. And I'm like, no, I don't care. I don't care like how emo he is and how much pain he's got in his past. That's no reason to be a dick about it. And actually Brie is the perfect example of that. She's the one who also has a lot of pain in her past and yet doesn't bully other people and treat them like crap. Obviously, Sal's character, you know he's going to redeem himself, and he kind of does at several points, but then sometimes he just dips back into the you're a dickhead and then goes back to the lovable character thing. So it goes on and off, and that's kind of how I feel about the character. I'm on and off about him. I'm like, sometimes I like him, sometimes I hate him. Okay, I have now just finished Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and oh my god, what a trip. This book was so good. So damn good. I rated it 5 stars. I'm not gonna make a big mystery out of it. It was just so damn good I had to rate it this high. So last time I talked to you guys, I think I said something along the lines of, people seem to be saying that the ending is gonna break me and destroy me and all that. And that did not seem to happen to me. I mean, there was a part towards the end, like chapter 56 was extremely emotional and so well written and written in a different way, like almost like poems. I know nothing about poetry, so I might be completely wrong, but it was not written the normal way that the rest of the book is written, so it was just different and it stood out, and the story within it was so powerful and important to what's going on, and just everything about it was so gripping. Loved chapter 56, and I can understand why that would be the chapter that breaks some people, that makes them feel the most. And there were also a couple of people that did die. I'm not gonna say who, I'm not gonna say in what context or anything like that because I don't want to give spoilers, but basically Tracy Deonn did not shy away from killing some of her characters, and just in a way that is normal because they are entering at some point, there is a battle, there is, you know, like going against the big bad guy and all that kind of stuff. So it makes perfect sense that some people wouldn't survive this. And I'm really, really glad that she did actually take that step, because a lot of YA novels do not and just kind of shy away from it, but I feel like it makes the story so much more powerful when there are casualties, like there should be, and just it makes you think even more about the type of victory that you'll get and the sacrifices that you'll get to get that victory and all that kind of stuff. So yes, really happy with the ending. There was some satisfaction to it, a lot of cliffhanger stuff and stuff that you're just like, okay, that's clearly gonna get solved in the next book, fair enough. But what happens towards the end and the way that Brie, our main character, becomes herself, her true self, I'm not gonna say how, just everything about that made me so happy, and it was so good and so powerful, and that scene was a fucking moment. Loved it. I don't have much else to say. I put the book through the co-pile system because I wanted to see whether my 5 stars were justified, and they were, because although I didn't love every single character, there's some characters that annoy me, including Alice, who became better towards the end. But I think I said something along the lines of 8 for characters out of 10, and then plot, storyline, logic, all of these things I rated 10, and I think the only other thing that I rated an 8 or a 7 was the logic, actually, because although the logic makes sense and everything makes sense, it was sometimes a little bit hard to follow, and some of the intricacies of the world building in there were a little bit complex. You have a lot of stuff to do with the magic, the lineage, a lot of stuff to do with Arthur and his different knights and all of that kind of stuff, and the way the magic works and all of that. And all of these different elements sometimes were kind of just thrown at you, and you were like, okay, I think I've understood from these 2 lines, but I don't remember it, you know, 10 pages later, and I have to remind myself what that means and what that is. So I would just say that's the only reason why I lowered my score for logic, just because I was like, I feel like some of it could have been explained better or in a more memorable way or in a more or less complex way, really. but it's still rounded up to a perfect 5, so I'm very, very happy with it because that's exactly how I feel about this book. The next book that I'm going to be picking up is The Night Itself by Zoe Marriott, and this is book 1 of The Name of the Blade. This book is about 360 pages, so it is a little bit shorter than Legendborn, which is good because Legendborn was 500 pages, and I think I don't really read that often thick books like that, and I don't love it because it just, although I'm enjoying the journey and I'm enjoying the book, and I really loved Legendborn, and I thought not a single scene was purposeless or useless. Every single scene felt like it was necessary. I still felt like I was reading 2 books instead of 1, just because to me a book should be around 300 pages, and that's good enough. I'm happy with that. So I am quite happy to go back to a normal sized one. And this one talks about this girl who steals her grandfather's katana and unleashes some dark forces and I guess powers as well. I'm not quite sure exactly what's gonna happen in this, but I did like the premise, the synopsis when I read it, so hopefully I enjoy myself reading it. It's a few days later and we're already 3 days into March, and I have now decided to DNF The Night Itself. I haven't even said anything about this book yet because I didn't even get to that. Normally I read about 100 pages before I decide whether I like a book or not, and then kind of do my first round of comments and how I feel about it and the story and just summarize everything. And this time I only read about 76 pages, I think, and then decided to DNF it. It's not bad, it's just not what I expected, and it's not keeping me interested, not very much. Basically in this we follow Mio, who lives in London. She's a teenager, I think she's turning 16 or something like that, and she decides to go to this dressed up fancy dress party with a friend. And she decides to go as this character from an anime, so she realizes that she owns this katana, this samurai sword, in her attic or basement, I can't remember, where her grandpa led her to look at it one day and she was obsessed with it and thought it was beautiful. So she decides to take the katana as part of her costume to be this anime character, and she kind of becomes obsessed with it to the point that it sounds a lot like Golem in Lord of the Rings. Like, she's always like, it's mine, 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 and it's just a little bit crazy. So there's clearly something going on, and she also has very strange dreams about, I think, the katana, and she remembers in her dreams sometimes her grandfather taking her to see it and how she reacted to it and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on in her life that kind of leads us to this fantastical universe, I guess. But it felt extremely middle grade to me and not young adult. I think it's a little bit more on the young adult side of things and less on the towards the new adult, young adult side of things, which I prefer, being someone who's older. So I don't think that it's a bad book or that it's badly written, but the writing is very simplistic and kind of led me to believe this was more of a middle grade. And the story as well, and the way people act in her high school and stuff, because she goes to this party and you have like her other high school friends there, and it's just very middle grade-ish, and I wasn't enjoying myself. And then I realized every single time I was thinking I need to read this book, it just felt like a chore to pick it up, and I didn't really want to. So that's when I thought, well, this was my resolution this year to, if I feel like that about the book, not pick it up and decide to DNF it earlier on so that I don't do like the usual and go plunge myself into a reading slump. So that's what I decided to do. Decided to DNF this after 76 pages, which I know is probably not enough to really know that much about the story, but it was just enough for me to know I'm not that interested in it. But that leads me to the next book I'm going to be reading, which is Cemetery Boys. So I'm going to start reading that book, but I need to decide on a third book because I've read Legendborn, then Cemetery Boys is going to be the second one, but because Night Itself is one that I'm DNFing, I still want to read 3 books in this, and I don't think a DNF counts, so I'm going to try and have a think about what book I should pick up next after Cemetery Boys as my third YA contemporary fantasy. Okay, so very quick update to let you know that I've made a decision on the third book I'll be reading for this little reading vlog, and it's going to be The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. page. So I didn't even realize this was by multiple authors, but it just sounds like a lot of fun. And look at that cover, how shiny it is. I do love shiny. This is following two girls in university who are in a sorority that is basically a coven of witches hiding in plain sight, I guess. And one of them is a legacy and has been there for a while, and the other one didn't even know witches were real, I think. So, and I guess this is about these two girls and how they interact with that sorority and coven of witches. One of them, who is called Scarlet Winter, has always known she's a witch and she wants to become the president of the sorority one day. And the other one is called Vivi Devereaux, and she did not know that she was a witch prior to this taking place, and basically the first girl, Scarlet, doesn't think that she's witch material or good enough to be in this sorority, I guess. So there's a little bit of a rivalry going on, but at the same time I think there's something like much darker that starts happening, and they're gonna have to work together to stop this and stop their silly rivalry. So that's all I know about this book. I really loved the summary of it and the cover, and also if you followed my writing vlog you may know this. If not, it just sounds a lot like the book that I have written, not that I've published it or anything like that, but just that the story, the synopsis of it has a lot of similarities, including the fact that my book takes place in college and there's sororities that are actually covens on campus. Although it's not the main element of my book and it's not the main plot of it, it has a prominent place in it. So I just thought it would be really fun to read this, see if maybe this would be a good comp as well, a good comp title, so a comparison title to put in whenever I try and pitch my story to agents, basically. So I'm interested in reading this book. It definitely fits the profile of what I think contemporary fantasy books should be or are. So I think this is a perfect third book for this series. Meanwhile, let me talk a tiny bit about Cemetery Boys, because I did start it and I am now on page 60, which is not very far. I've only read this little bit here, so it's really not that much. But I just wanted to talk very quickly about it because I'm really enjoying it. And basically I had no idea about this, but our main character Yadriel is actually a transgender guy, so who used to be born a woman and is now a man. And a lot of the story has to do with how Yadriel wants to prove himself as a brujo. I cannot pronounce this right. A brujo? But I feel like it's really hard for me to say it like that every time because I'm already speaking in a different accent when I speak in English than my own original French accent. So to try and add on a Spanish accent on top of this to another word is very confusing to my brain. So please forgive me whenever I'm going to say this wrong, because I know I'm going to say it wrong. But basically, these are the male witches of this community, and you have the female witches that are called bruja. Bruja, maybe? I don't know, sorry. If Yadriel had decided to stay a woman, he would then have been a bruja, and the brujas are pretty much more into the healing part of their powers. They use chicken blood or something to heal people. There's like a celebration when girls turn 15, I forgot the name of it, but basically that's what was expected of Yadriel to happen, but then Yadriel refused because he was like, I'm not meant to be a bruja, and then Yadriel becomes a brujo, but not allowed by his community to become so officially and to come into his powers with the whole ceremony thing and everything, because they're like, no, you're not really a boy, so we can't let you do that. And Yadriel is like, well, I fucking am. I know in my heart and soul that I am meant to be a brujo. And so he goes through with the ceremony on his own with his cousin Maritza, I think. Yes, Maritza. And they do it together in secret. And it seems to be working as well. So the boy's power, the brujo's powers, is meant to be to find lost souls, so ghosts and spirits, and help them to move on and just try and figure out how to help them since they're lost. So what happens is Yadriel does this and tries to prove that he can find, I think one of his cousins dies, and he tries to help, and everyone is like, no, you can't help because you need to stay here with the other women. And he's like, what the fuck, no, I'm a guy now, can you not get it right? And so he ends up going on his own to try and help. When he calls for the spirit, thinking, I think this is going to be the spirit of my cousin, it ends up being a completely different spirit of of a guy called Julian who used to go to his school. And Julian says like, no, I'm not gonna let you send me back and sever my ties to the physical world until you help me do this or that. So basically Julian refuses to go, and when Yadriel tries to sever his tie to the physical world, it doesn't work. So he's stuck with this ghost who used to be a very hot guy from his school. So that's pretty much where we're at page 60. I don't think any of this is a spoiler, it's pretty much in the synopsis as well. But I'm very much enjoying this. I'm loving all the characters. I really like the way that it's told. The writing style is so fast-paced and flowy. I do know that Aidan Thomas has also written a new book that is coming out recently, I think this year, and that I was quite interested in reading. So since I'm now discovering that I really enjoy his writing style and this type of story, if his next book is anything like this, I'm definitely gonna enjoy it as well. Because although I'm only 60 pages in, I can tell you I'm gonna love this book. Okay, I just got to page 170 of The Cemetery Boys, and I just have to say this. This is something I kind of forgot to mention when I first started talking about the book, but I just have this feeling that there's a character that's been introduced quite early on who is the main villain, and I know what the big mystery is. Like, I don't know how to explain without giving any spoilers, so I'm going to try to be extremely vague, but there's basically a character that at some point our main character Yadriel talks to, and this character, I just have the feeling that they've been introduced solely because we gotta know from the start who they are, because they're gonna be the main villain. And there's the mention of something in one of the scenes where the character isn't too far, like I can't remember whether the character is directly there or has just been there and was just mentioned in passing or something. But there's like a scene where something is mentioned about like a certain spell or something like that, and I'm like, that's gonna be what's going on 100%. I know that this is gonna be what the villain is doing and why Miguel, who's, you know, Yadriel's cousin who's disappeared and died, but that they still haven't found the body of. I believe that's why Miguel died and disappeared, and I believe that's also why Julian, the ghost that we meet, died. I feel like when I first started reading the book and that character was introduced, I was like, I think I know what's gonna happen or what's gonna be discovered, but it was so subtle that it was just in the back of my mind, and I was just like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. And then now that we're getting a little bit further in, and it's page 170, which is about the middle of the book, I'm like, yes, I think I was right. I do feel like getting to this part, and after what I just said about who I think the bad guy is and what their plan is, I think it's a little bit too obvious now. I know I just said that, like, it's not done in a way that you feel like it's predictable. I'm not saying it's predictable, but I just feel like the hints are a little bit too obvious in a way that I'm like, there's no way that I'm the only one who's guessed this by now. There's no way that no one else is seeing what's going on by now. Oh my god, just a 2 minutes update, but I have just reached the point in the book towards the very end. I only have this bit at the top to read left, and it's just finally happened where we get to discover the villain's plan and who the villain is. And I was right, I had guessed it, I knew who it was, and I knew what they wanted to do and how they were gonna try to do it, and yeah, that's it. I just have the satisfaction to tell you guys that I was right and that it wasn't a red herring that I was falling into, that it was actually what I guessed at the beginning of the book, so pretty happy with myself. Still think it's a little bit too obvious, especially at a certain point. Like, it's too obvious too early on. I don't mind a plot that is quite obvious, like an intrigue that is quite obvious, but I need it to lead me on to the wrong, like the red herring for a while before there's like a small twist or something that actually reveals what it is that is going on. It's very hard to talk about this without giving spoilers, so I'm gonna stop now. But yeah, that was literally just to say that I was right. Okay, oh my god, I just finished Cemetery Boys. Wow. Just wow. This, I wasn't sure towards the end because I kept saying, oh, I know I've guessed what is going on, I know I've guessed who the bad guy is and what they're doing. So in my head I was like, maybe it's a 4 stars, you know, because as much as I'm enjoying it, I don't love how that was a little bit too guessable, I guess, or too obvious. And then the ending hit. And I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Just everything about it was so fucking perfect. It got me teary-eyed. I just had to wipe my nose a little bit because it got me teary-eyed for sure. It got me so excited, going like, oh wow, every second. And I don't know how else to express this. I was just, the ending was perfection. Like all of the last chapters that resolved the story, including the epilogue afterwards, everything was exactly what one could hope from the story. Exactly, and more. Like, I didn't think it would get that good. I didn't think it would give me a conclusion this good. I think maybe it's because I've been reading so many trilogy and duologies and things like that, and just series in general, that I've forgotten how good a standalone can be and how amazing it can be to read what I think is a standalone, at least, where you have a proper conclusion to things, to everything, and everything gets resolved and closed, and you don't feel like there's any missing information towards the end. And it was just so satisfying. Everything about it was the most satisfying ending ever. And like, I don't know whether I filmed myself making faces when I was reading the stuff that started happening towards the end, but I was on an emotional roller coaster, and that hasn't happened in so long. And even though I've loved a lot of the books that I've read recently, and a lot of them I have rated 5 stars as well, I gotta say this 5-star feels so well deserved, just because of how much it made me feel towards the end. Which means that the next book that I'm going to be reading now is The Ravens. I talked a tiny bit about it earlier when I told you guys that I had decided this would be my 3rd book for this little series. So yes, I'll have a start on this one. I do really love how shiny this cover is. It's so cool. This one is closer to 400 pages. It's 390 or something. So I think it's just a little bit bigger than Cemetery Boys, really. Okay, so I have now reached page 106 of The Ravens, and so far I'm quite enjoying it. I would say it's a little bit less good than the previous 2 books that I've read for this vlog, but it's still enjoyable. What I mean by that is that although the style is very flowy and the way that it's been written, I'm really enjoying. On the other hand, I can see why some of the comments I saw on Goodreads were made, such as the fact that it feels very high schoolish for a book that is supposedly set in college, so it's a little bit confusing, and it just doesn't feel that complex or intriguing. Like, not that much happens so far, and I'm already 100 pages in, which is interesting because technically things happen, as in, you know, we're discovering this coven and everything, and there's recruitment and all that, but nothing super sudden or extremely intriguing, or no murder has happened, you know, like nothing sudden has happened. I don't know how else to say that. I've said that already. So let me start from the beginning. Basically, we have 2 point of views in this book. The first one is from Vivienne Devereaux, and she basically is someone who doesn't know about magic. She thinks that it's all charlatan stuff because her mom is a tarot card reader, but she's more like trying to scam people, I guess, just to make money. And Vivi hates it and she's really not into it. Basically, Vivi kind of resents her mom a lot for the upbringing that she's had with that type of, you know, job that she's got, and also the fact that whenever she seems to read something in the cards that says that there's danger or whatever, they suddenly have to move flat and city or whatever. And so they've moved a lot, and she says herself at some point that she's never been in a place more than 2 years. So she's never able really to make proper friends, and because of that she has become someone who's a little bit more awkward and doesn't really know how to present herself to others, and is a little bit, yeah, unsure of herself. And on top of things, it doesn't seem like she owns a lot of very nice clothes or anything like that. So I don't know whether she's a little bit on the poor side. I think that's the case, because she does mention getting a scholarship in order to, I think it's a scholarship. Yeah, it says here, she'd been shocked when she received a full scholarship to Westerly, a school she'd considered to be way out of her league. So basically she just got a scholarship to this place. So I think she's on the poor side, and her mom having a job that is basically just reading tarot cards is probably also the reason why, because I don't think there's a dad in the picture. He's not mentioned, at least. So that's it. That's the only person taking care of her, and her mom seems to want to move flat all the time and cities all the time, every single time she's had a bad reading. So yeah, that's our first character. And then our second character is Scarlet Winter, and Scarlet is herself someone who is already in this sorority that is going to be the setting for this book, Kappa something, I forgot the full name of it, but basically it's one of the oldest and more seclusive sororities on campus at Westerly. And Scarlet is a legacy in the sense that her mom and her sister were both in the same sorority, and it's a front for a coven of witches that is considered one of the most powerful covens, and they're called the Ravens, the witches that go there. So basically, Scarlet's got a lot of pressure on her from her mom and her sister, who were both at one point the president. What is the name for it? Yeah, the sorority president. And Scarlet's really hoping that she's going to be the next sorority president. So she just has a lot of pressure on her shoulders to become that. And she's very pristine and obviously comes from money and education into this kind of world of witches. So she knows everything about her legacy as a witch and all that. So it's not a mystery to her. She also mentions a boyfriend, Mason, that she hasn't seen all summer, and that she's quite impatient to see again when she goes back to uni. So as we follow these two, we also discover that Scarlet has some sort of dark secret in her past that is kind of a secret that belongs to the sorority itself, I guess, to the Ravens, because it seems like someone may have died. I'm not sure whether they died or were badly hurt. A girl named Harper. Something seems to be coming out of the darkness to remind Scarlet, I guess, of what she's done, and we don't know exactly what that is, but yeah. So that's kind of what's going on with Scarlet, and then Vivi is invited to go to this rush party at the sorority house at Kappa, and she doesn't obviously know that this is a coven. So when she parties there, I guess she's invited afterwards to pledge, and she decides to go, and then that's when she discovers, and this is kind of what's happened in the last couple of chapters, so obviously not a spoiler because it's in the synopsis, but it's a little bit later on in the book. It's only towards page 100. So she's finally just made it through the pledge thing and becoming one of the official littles, the new pledges of the group of witches that are joining the sorority now. And she's just been told that her big, aka her big sister, the one who's going to be taking care of her and teaching her spells and everything, is going to be Scarlet. And the reason why she's a little bit worried about that is because she's had a couple of encounters with Scarlet. The first one during the rush party, which did not go so well because Scarlet was very judgmental of the way that she was dressed and everything. She wasn't on theme for the themed party and all that, and it seemed like Scarlet was just thinking, you're obviously not Cat-Bat material, like you're not Raven's material. And then later on another encounter happened which made it even worse, which is that Vivi ran twice into the same boy, and it seemed like, ooh, sparks flew, blah blah blah, except that the boy in question is Mason, who is Scarlet's boyfriend, and clearly Scarlet noticed the interactions and was really unhappy about it and a little bit jealous. So all of that does not bode well for our Vivi, one of the two main characters, or for Scarlet, because it doesn't seem like she's going to keep her boyfriend for very, very long. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I don't like that plotline. I'm not too happy about that plotline. I hate it when it's like pitting two girls against one another for the attention of a boy. It's really not something that I enjoy. So I hope this is going to be resolved quickly, or that no one is going to get with him. Or maybe they're going to become, you know, a sapphic couple and we're going to get Vivi and Scarlet instead. I would be fine with that. I just don't want it to become some sort of pitting the two against each other because of that, and Vivi ending up with a boy and Scarlet breaking up with him and them being mad at each other for it. Or, I don't know, I just don't want to see that. That's just not something that I find entertaining or nice in a book, so not my type of plotline. However, the rest is quite fun so far. I think I'm quite intrigued by what's going to happen, what happened to this girl Harper, what's in the past of Scarlet and everything, but mostly I can't wait for the moment that these two are going to become more friends, and I think that's going to happen because they're going to be kind of forced to, but nothing dramatic has happened yet, which is why I was saying it feels a little bit slow. That's my only issue with it. It's a little bit too slow to start. I finished last night reading The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page, and I rated it 3 stars. So it was average, it was good, it was fun, entertaining, read quite fast, and was action-packed enough. Like, enough things happened that I wasn't bored, it was never dull or anything like that. But I have to say, the characters were a little bit lackluster. A lot of the time they just felt like there wasn't that much about them, that they were a little bit boring and a little bit underdeveloped. I think in particular Vivi was a little bit boring to me, a little bit dull, and felt very fake. Like, it felt to me, and I'm not even sure because I didn't really read through the lines properly to take note of, oh, here or there this happens, but in my head it feels almost like I was told a lot about how she was rather than shown a lot about how she was. Like, I feel especially that she was a little bit too much like a Wattpad character, because a lot of the time at the beginning she was like, oh, I'm so awkward and socially anxious and I don't know how to navigate myself in social situations because I've moved so many times that I've never made proper friends and I have no idea how to do that. So I understand the reasoning behind it and kind of what I was told, but it never felt like I was properly shown this. Very often it felt like I had a different voice talking about, you know, the POV, the third person POV that we had about Vivi. It felt like it was a different voice than when she actually did those actions, almost like she was faking it. Although it's a fake character, it's a fictional character, but it felt like she was faking it, and every now and then she'd be like, oh no, I couldn't possibly dance because I've never done that dance in public, and it was just so random in the middle of her feeling a little bit more normal and just a little bit more badass than that, and then suddenly she'd say shit like that and you would be like, do I believe her? It feels fake. I don't know how else to explain this. The second thing is it felt a little bit flat. Like, it was okay, but the plot and the logic were just that. They were fine, they were okay. Nothing that wowed me or made me feel any more like, oh my god, this is finally happening, or anything like that. I didn't, like, there was no huge mystery about who the bad guy was. It was like a small twist towards the end. There was a small twist, but the twist didn't wow me. It didn't make me feel like, oh my god, would I've never seen this coming, what the hell. It just made me think, oh, Yeah, that makes sense, I guess, you know? And I think for that reason, I couldn't really put it up further than 3 stars. I think it was fun enough, and I do think I want to read the next one in the series that I think comes out this year or the next, I'm not sure. And I think it's called The Monarchs, but just because it was fun, it was enjoyable, and I like the cover, and I think I like the cover of the other book as well, and I don't mind like continuing reading the series, but I'm not super excited by it. I'm not really thinking like, oh my god, I need to know what's gonna happen in the next book. It's more of a, yeah, it was okay. It was an enjoyable experience, and sometimes books are like that. I think that's it for this little video where I was talking about all of the different YA contemporary fantasies that I read, and I really enjoyed myself. I think out of 3 books, well, 4 books that I picked in total, I guess, 2 of them were 5 stars, which is great and really just means that I've had 2 5 stars in this month, which is amazing. Love that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and I guess the usual. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a comment down below because I always try to respond. Consider subscribing, ringing that bell, and I will see you guys in the next one.